All right, knights and squires, world builders, dreamers, welcome to the first day of LTUE 43. This year our theme is Ignite Your Genius. Everyone's brain helps genius ignite yours. We hope that this weekend is a call to arms for you to find inspiration, to look inside yourself and find your own genius as well. And who better to lead us into this adventure than our first guest of honor and keynote speaker. His talents have literally shaped the landscapes of modern fantasy. It's a joke. I'm warming him up. Allow me to introduce you to Isaac Stewart. Isaac has worked for over 20 years in the animation, video game, and publishing industries. He currently is the VP of Creative Development at Dragonsteel, where he heads up the design of Dragonsteel's art, books, products, and more. In addition to his work at Dragonsteel, Isaac has created maps and symbols for some of the world's most renowned fantasy authors. Isaac doesn't just illustrate fantasy, he writes it too. He's the author and artist behind the delightful children's book, Monsters Don't Wear Underpants. And when he's not crafting epic worlds or bringing creatures to life, he's at home, lives in Utah with his wife, children, and several cats. So ready to ignite your minds, ignite the genius inside you, prepare to be inspired. It's my great honor to welcome to the stage, Isaac Stewart.
Maybe I'll just stand. I don't know, I haven't done this before, so hey, we'll do this together. Thank you, first off, thank you to LTUE for, it's really a great honor to be here among all of you. When I was an undergrad at BYU, I don't know, it was 99 or 2000, I was wandering through the Wilkinson Center, and I just happened upon LTUE. I walked into this room where there was a man talking about writing, and I recognized him from a book I read. This was Dave Wolverton. And after that, I wound up taking his writing class twice and just learning a lot. But he was very patient with me. I was the guy that after class caught him and would sit and chat. And now I'm like, oh wow. It was just, I liked talking to him. I liked learning. Many of you probably met him. And what a great man. And thank you, LTUE, for introducing me to this world of conventions and also to my first writing mentor. All right, well, let's dive in. I hope you'll forgive the design of the slides that you will see soon. It's a little ironic that the same person who designed something like this is going to design also the crappiest slideshow that you're going to see during this entire convention. Hey, form follows function, and I just needed these to be functional in one form or another. All right, you've seen this poem before. All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The bold that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. It's from the Fellowship of the Ring. And Gandalf talking about Aragorn, who hides his nobility when he is in fact the heir to the throne of Gondor. So, but I want to kind of focus today on this line. Not all those who wander are lost. I see it everywhere. I see it in bumper stickers. I've seen tattoos with this on there. I think that it's become kind of ubiquitous, that it's kind of become disattached from Tolkien's work. But it's probably one of the most quoted phrases Tolkien wrote. It's right up there with, one does not simply wander the world. Actually, Tolkien didn't write that. This is what he actually said. You cannot simply march into Mordor and challenge the Dark Lord openly. The only way to enter Mordor is by stealth. Which sounds more like what your DM would say. But this doesn't really make a great meme, so. One does not simply wander into Mordor. Maybe that would be a good title for today's speech. One does not simply wander into Mordor. All right. Not all who wander are wise. So, not all wandering is aimless. Sometimes wandering is a journey of purpose and of finding one's identity. Today I'm going to tell you the story of two men who wandered. And one of them was me. I'm sure many of us have wandered. And the other one, we'll talk about in a minute. I'm going to kind of recap, I guess, some of the things that Ryan said, because I wasn't sure who would know who I am. And so I was just going to kind of give you a rundown of my wanderings and where I got where I did. So one of my earliest memories, artistic memories, is being around 8 years old and drawing anthropomorphic bugs for my mom. She needed these for some church activity, and so I just remember drawing these cartoon Disney-esque bugs. She was, in a sense, my first boss. I've been freelancing ever since. And after that, in my spare time, I remember drawing under the undersides of beds and tables. And I did not get the same sort of praise from that art that I got from drawing bugs. But maybe that's why I kind of pushed me back into commercial art instead of tagging walls. But when I was a young kid, I liked the outdoors. My dad told us Western stories all the time when we would go on road trips. I'm from Idaho. Where I look at this here and I'm like, let's put our shorts on. But not really. I don't like the cold. But I wanted to. It's weird to me because I talk about this kid that was me so long ago and it doesn't feel like me. He wanted to have a sled dog team and do the Iditarod. Later, he wanted to be an aerospace engineer and be the first person on Mars. I mean, these all sound cool, but later I realized that, both of those are like really long road trips in a cramped space with a long time in between potty breaks. That just does not sound fun to me. So, because of Idaho, probably, these are the sort of books that I read. Read a lot of Louis L'Amour, Call of the Wild, Kavik the Wolf Dog, Boys and Dogs, those sort of books. Wanted a sled dog team. And these were all really long. They're like over 100 pages. It took me an incredibly long time for me to get through them. And usually they were super destroyed by the time because, I'm carrying it around. And anyway. Then my aunt sent my dad a package for his birthday. But I got to the package first. I don't know what it was. This package was interesting. Yellow manila envelope. Opened it up, and there's this big, fat fantasy novel. I did not know what a fantasy novel was, though. I had seen Tolkien books that my dad had picked out of the garbage in college. They were weird purple covers. They're really cool. But, I'd seen those, but I didn't know there was such a thing as a fantasy novel. This book had incredible artwork. That's the first thing. Probably because there's a wolf on the cover, right? I'm like, hey, maybe there's sled dogs. But to this day, I have an art print of this in my studio or my office. I actually have 2 art prints of it, so I can have it in different rooms of the house. But it reminds me where I came from. And kind of that sense of wonder that I had discovering fantasy for the first time. So, Michael Whelan, after that I started picking up everything I could with Michael Whelan, artwork on it. And he was my favorite artist. But also with this book, there was a map, which was really cool. There was also a warning at the front of the book. And I don't think that this is standard in fantasy, but in Tad's book, there was this warning about not all is as it seems in this world, right? It's kind of a warning that you could put in the front of any fantasy book. But for me, I'm like, okay, that part of me that was drawing on the undersides of tables, I'm like, this is a book I shouldn't be reading. So I'm gonna read it. I don't know when I told my dad, hey, that birthday gift from your sister? Oh, this is it. And it's, I still have it though. And I don't think that I've ever told Dad, hey, I stole your book. Maybe I should get it. I don't know. But the Dragon Bone Chair is basically the story of a kid who goes to the frozen north, becomes best friends with a wolf rider, and slays a dragon. So it had everything I wanted in it. There weren't sled dogs, but, cold snow. That was a theme for me growing up. Graduated on to other things. That's my actual personal copy, not my dad's copy. Dragon Bone Chair, and then this first edition paperback of The Eye of the World that I found at a friend's house. And I think I stole that one. It was his dad's. So keep your dad's books away from me. I will accidentally steal them evidently. So I became hooked on fantasy novels, science fiction. I dove into Jurassic Park because my friends were like, yeah, see, you gotta read this before the movie comes out or else you're not cool. So I bought into that and went on to reading other science fiction like Ender's Game and so forth. Well, so my reading habits have changed. But too bad that my fashion habits have. Oh boy, that tie and that shirt. Not that I dress any better now, but I just know that it's let's not match anything. If you wear black, pretty much anything matches. So I was writing constantly at this point. I drew maps and created my own worlds and characters, submitting stories to magazines. I served as a missionary in the Philippines, and as I did so, I was doodling dragons and swords and things in the margins of my planner. And when I returned home and went to BYU, I decided to become a dentist. It's because my dad told me that was a good thing to do. Sorry. Sorry. No, that was not a dramatic pause intended to be part of this. He said that as a dentist, you could set your own hours and basically write whenever you want. He was like, well, the other dentists go golfing, because that's what he wanted to do. You can be writing books. So I'm like, okay, cool, I'll be a dentist. So I was taking all these science classes required for that. And in every one of my science classes, I'm doodling in the margins, dragons and swords, wolves, towers, and luckily there was a well-meaning hygienist when I was watching. It was the worst thing. I watched a dentist pull somebody's wisdom teeth, and he was just prying on this lady's mouth, right? And he pulls out these teeth that the roots were up like this, and throws them in a tray, right? And then he's like, I've never seen anything like that. Look at those, and it's some scientific terms. I don't know, look at the anterior point and the way that it's doing this thing. That's pretty awesome. And then he just left. And left me with the hygienist, and I'm like, oh boy, what am I getting myself into? Anyway, this well-meaning hygienist, she talked me out of that. She's like, is there anything else you want to do? Maybe art or animation. Oh, do that. It didn't take much convincing after that. So, but even then, despite LTUE, Dave Wolverton, and the classes, and the burning desire inside me to become an author and an artist, and instead I became an animator, which at least was a little closer. I'm not very good at darts, evidently, but I'm getting closer to the bullseye. After graduation and working in animation for a few years, I started seeing a lot of the jobs going overseas, and thought my career as an animator was going to be over soon. I thought I saw the writing on the wall. And so I went back to school to become an optometrist. Because you didn't have to put your fingers in people's mouths. And so I went traveling around the state doing glaucoma screenings, and I went back to school. I already had a degree, but I went back to BYU and started taking more science classes. And I'm like, when was I gonna learn? And I'm still doodling dragons and swords and things in all of my notebooks. And about this time I had enough science credits to fill a small truck, and I needed a break. And so I looked up the science fiction and fantasy writing class to see if Dave was still there teaching it. Instead, there was some young guy named Brandon Sanderson teaching it. And I'm like, who's this guy? For some reason, I looked him up in the catalog at BYU, the library, and I was the first person to check out Dragonsteel. Blew the dust off it, literally. Took it home and read it. And I'm like, this guy's pretty good. I bet he could teach me something. So I took the class. He and I were closer in age than the rest of the people in the class, and we had a lot of friends in common, and we clicked, we became friends. And Brad was in our writing group about that time too, so. Yeah. We would go out to dinner fairly often after the class, and very soon after Elantris came out, we were at dinner at Macaroni Grill. I honestly don't know if this is a picture of Macaroni Grill. But it kind of looked like that, and I haven't been there for years, but you could draw on the tablecloths. But you know me, I flipped the tablecloth off, I'm drawing right on the table. I wasn't doing that. But I was doodling, just doodling. I was drawing a face. And Brandon looked over and said, "You're an artist?" "Yeah, I'm an artist." "You want to do maps for my next fantasy novel?" "It's called Mistborn, I'll send it to you." Yeah, I'll do that. And at the time, I'm like, I'm drawing a face, how do you know I do maps? I've literally been drawing maps my whole life up to that point. So the moral of the story here is, there we are as babies. Do not discount the power of a well-timed doodle. I literally got my job because I couldn't stop drawing on stuff. So, sayonara optometry. I was going to be a fantasy map maker. I made $300 off that first map. All I needed to do was like 100 maps a year. And I might be able to scrape by. Right? So I had to get a different job. I worked as a hotel night clerk on weekends, and during the week I did graphic design for a company that made nozzles to fill up mining trucks with gasoline. Those mining trucks are huge. The tires are like twice as tall as I am, and their gas tanks are so big. They had to literally fire hose gas in there, otherwise you would be there for a week filling it up. That was pretty interesting, but it's not what I wanted to do my whole life. It was time for me to get a real job again. So I started applying, and it was actually Dave Wolverton again who helped me out. He pointed me toward a video gaming company in Pleasant Grove called Wahoo Studios. It's no longer there. But between working there and on other game companies, and I'll share some of the games that I worked on, but I worked with this guy right here, Sean Boyles. He's my art director at work and longtime friend, best man at my wedding. And I'm glad he's here, and thank you. But we worked on games such as Cloning Clyde, Kingdom for Keflings, Band of Bugs, and somehow unalliterative Twisted Metal. Maybe they should have called it Mangled Metal. Anyway, I worked on that. That was not at Wahoo, that was at a different company. And then we worked on Disney Infinity with the company that did that avalanche up in Salt Lake. But that was the height of my video game career, was working on the Moose Topiary that is in that game. So if you've ever played that, I did the Moose Topiary. And I remember we went in and we went with Avalanche the day that they released the trailer for this game. And we were in a room kind of like this in Salt Lake at a hotel that was right next to where Avalanche was at. And tons of employees from there. There were like 20 people that walked it, but there were like hundreds, it felt like, at Avalanche. And they're all there, they're going to watch the video of the Disney Infinity trailer. And as it's going through, and I don't know anybody there, as it's going through, it literally pauses in the middle of the trailer and shows the Moose Topiary, kind of as a punchline to a joke. It's just like spinning there. It's like, Mr. Incredible can run fast. You can be Ursula and do power, steal people's voices and stuff. And you can put in a Moose Topiary. Anyway, that's the height of my video game career right there. They should have called it something else though, like, I don't know, just to get it alliterative. So, all the while, I'm moonlighting as a fantasy cartographer for Brandon and other art authors. And I was doing book design, layout, and art direction for Stacy Whitman and 2 books in New York. Just taking on odd jobs, learning all sorts of different skills all over the board. I was doing all these disparate things, putting my own writing on the back burner and working all-nighters trying to get, at the time, the art for The Way of Kings out the door. Meanwhile, I'm working on mangled metal during the day, that's my night. Later, I was learning to paint in oils and really sharpening my skills. And at the same time, my wife and I created my wife Kara, who works at the company as well, created a small business called Inkwing, to create merch and art prints based on the art I was doing for Brandon. We even had a booth at San Diego Comic-Con in 2012. This was our first booth ever. And in 2013, Brandon offered Kara a job. And he must have seen the look on my face because he sort of went, I guess you can come work with us too. Okay, cool. I get it, I'd take Kara over me too. But I mean, the angels were singing, oh, you can have a video game star. And I'm gonna have to do freelance. It took me like 12 years to get out of freelance. But a few notable things during this time. Remember that book that got me into fantasy, The Dragon Bone Share, and the map. I got to do maps for Tad in the new series that he released, one of them, which was kind of cool, right? It was this like nice circular thing that the book that got me into fantasy, I got to go back and meet the author, and I meet the cover artist, and to realize they're really cool guys, and got to work with them on a project. And you remember the art by Michael Whalen? I've gotten to work with him on the covers for the latest 3 Stormlight books. It's a dream come true. And yeah, might get emotional about that. It was just really cool for me. And remember the Wheel of Time book I stole? At Dragonsteel, we're working on making leather-bound books of the Wheel of Time, which again is a dream come true. Sean's actually heading that up. We've got Christy here who's been working on it with us. If I'm missing anybody else, you're all awesome. But if I could go back in time and tell my 13-year-old self all the cool things that he was going to get to do, after wandering for a bit. Okay, yeah, I know that's not me. That is me. Not as a 12-year-old. As an 8-year-old. Actually, it's proof that I lived in the 70s at some point. I'd be like, hey kid, you're gonna do some really cool things someday. You'll do art and design for a bunch of neat books. And more books. And more books. and more books. And that 13-year-old me would say, wow, how many of them did you write? Well, I did the art and jokes for the blue book here, and I wrote and illustrated this lid for the flat book. Whoa, 200 words long. Seriously, you wrote a book about monsters and underpants? Have you abandoned all that is decent? Well, we turned it into a Lego set and a plushie. And they obviously are not wearing underpants. I don't want to be known as the underpants guy, so please don't. Cartography guy is good. Lame. Show me it's worth it to grow up to be you. I got to co-author a Stormlight story with Brandon last year. Okay, that'll do. For now. So, who am I? I really don't know what I am or who I am, but in a professional sense, what am I? I've done a lot of wandering, I feel like. I feel like a lot of us have done that. I've worn a lot of different hats: cartographer, animator, designer, architect, author, webcomic co-creator with Sean, cutscene writer with Sean, business person, songwriter, musician, I spelled musician wrong, yeah. Lego builder, and I've realized something that I'm a maker. I make things. I envision something, I learn how to do it, and I make it real. And I think a lot of us can identify with that, because especially at a convention like this, I think that we are all makers. So Tolkien has another famous quote. He said, "I wisely started with a map and made the story fit." Actually, he said it in a British accent, though. Have you ever seen videos of Tolkien? I can't understand. I don't know. It's just it doesn't go in my brain. But he's cool to listen to. I just don't. I have to watch the subtitles. So he designed the geography of Middle Earth before fully developing the narrative. The landscapes, the distances, the locations, the roads that go wherever we're on. The world, the environment is what shapes the journey. So your wandering is what shapes you. So I told you I was going to tell you about another guy, another wanderer. And we'll talk about a little about him and how his world shaped his journey. That was a guy named William Morris, who kind of looks like he should have 2 R's in the middle of his name and be a fantasy writer. Not George Martin, but just like, all the fantasy writers. He looks like a famous fantasy writer. So he lived in the late 1800s, and he's probably the most famous designer to come out of the UK at that time. He designed patterns, but he was a lot more than just that. He just dabbled in everything. He was a social activist, a poet, an author. He was a calligrapher, a businessman, a publisher, a conservationist. Like all these old buildings in London, he was trying to keep them from being torn down. He spoke out against British imperialism. He eventually became a socialist, which I'm not really on board with that, but I think that his heart was in the right place for everything. He saw the plight of the lower classes that were being exploited during the Industrial Revolution and just felt like he needed to do something about it. But boy, that just seems like a full-time job by itself. In the meantime, he's doing all these other things too. So he mastered dyeing, hand block printing, weaving, carpet knotting, tapestries, pattern designs. He was one of the principal instigators and became the face, really, of the arts and crafts movement, which was a rejection of industrialization. They saw that as a force that would put artisans out of business and lead eventually to sterile, soulless designs. So I think he might be right. And I say this fully admitting that I have IKEA furniture at my house. But this does not look like that. If you haven't heard of William Morris, you may have heard, or at least recognized his wife, Jane Burden, who was the face of the many pre-Raphaelite paintings. So, in the late 1800s, while also running his design firm, he did murals, stained glass, metalwork, furniture, embroidery. He wrote epic poetry at the same time. He did one called The Earthly Paradise, which was sort of this love letter to Chaucer. He really loved the Middle Ages and Chaucer. That's kind of they're rejecting industrialization, and they're going back to the Middle Ages where things were so much better. There was a lot of handcrafted things in the Middle Ages. And that's really where they were getting at, was that craftsmanship. They worried they were going to lose that in industrialization. So it was this love letter to Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. He retold a bunch of tales in classical and medieval settings. And he became famous at the time for them. And the public in London was sort of really confused by this. They were like, look at the artiste, the decorator who thinks he can also write stories. This is amazing. I don't know, they were like, put him in a circus because he's an artist who can write. But in response, Morris said, a little tongue-in-cheek, if a chap can't compose an epic poem while he's weaving tapestry, he'll never do any good at all. So I'm a little bit worried that we don't have any tapestry weaving. Do we? Is that on the track? Anyway. In the early 1870s, he traveled twice to Iceland, and he spent significant time there. He learned Icelandic because while he was there, he fell in love with the Icelandic sagas. And he wanted to translate them into English. In Iceland, he and a friend trekked across the rugged land riding ponies. I hope one of them was named Bill or Bella. And did a lot of camping, or staying with people on small farmsteads. He made this map of the journey. And he felt a really strong connection to the land. Again, he's rejecting industrialization. He leaves London. He comes to a place that is, to him, a little further back in time. And he loved how the people at the time included the sagas in their everyday life. They were tied to these stories, and they were tied to the land. And he wrote, all knowledge of Europe's historical past has faded from memory of the people, but in Iceland, every homestead and every field has its well-remembered history. So in the 1870s, he became a calligrapher. He played with writing and designing the letters. He worked out page layouts. He tried out the techniques of old illuminated manuscripts. He created this visual world to write out his translations of the Icelandic sagas. So he was an artist and a writer and a maker, rejecting industrialism to make things with his hands. As a political activist, he tried to revive traditional crafting skills, which he believed could change society. It's kind of a little bit different, political activist. It's like, I don't know, do more ceramics, carve more things, draw on the underside of tables more. He gave lectures about how the decorative arts could change the world. He felt society could be reformed by artists. He argued that the environment in which we live affects the way we feel and behave. The things we surround ourselves with and the conditions under which they are made matter. They have the power to rejuvenate or oppress. I think he would have gotten along with, his name went out of my head. The architect. Right, thank you. Sorry, why did that go over my head? I can see all of his buildings. I think he would have gotten along with him. we see some of that today as people right now are getting a little bit more disenamored with kind of what sometimes is becoming a little more sterile in digital art. It's a little smooth, it gets a little, and so even in digital art, people are starting to show more brush strokes and things like that. And there are a lot of people who are going from digital art to physical art again, because they want that thing to have when they are done. And people are buying more original art right now. So there's no time, I think, better time in the last 25 or 50 years to be an artist because of this. Well, we're getting, when do we end?
We have 8 minutes.
10 more minutes, okay. Anyway, I think there's a huge amount of people that are hungry for physical things because we're spending so much time in this virtual world right now that it's nice to be able to step back and live in the real world. I really like this philosophy. All work done with pleasure is art. So, in 1891, he made Kelmscott Press. He became a book designer and a publisher. And this was like he was taking all of the different skills that he'd gathered in his wanderings to create books. He paid close attention to the details, the ink, the handmade paper, the type, the illustrations. We see especially this, his masterpiece, I'll show you here in a slide here soon, is the works of Geoffrey Chaucer that Kelmscott printed. He was trying to create the ideal book. And some have even called it the most beautiful book ever printed. So this is his collaborator who worked with him. This is Edward Burne-Jones, who was part of the Creative Raphaelites. Indeed, when the book is done, if we live to finish it, because they were pretty old at this point, it will be like a pocket cathedral, so full of design, and I think Morris, the greatest master of ornament in the world. Here's some of the layouts. In December of 1895, Morris received the first sample copy. And this is a pretty beautiful book. The works of Geoffrey Chaucer. You'll see someday how this is influencing a project I'm working on right now. But sadly, not long after he held that book in his hands, he passed away. But at least he got to see kind of the culmination of what he'd been working on. I'm going to go back to his writings. So this is a book that he wrote called The House of the Wolfings. And this is about the Romans and a Germanic tribe. And with each book he wrote, it kind of became a little more detached from reality. It started with the Romans and the Germanic tribes, and then it's a little more detached from history. And he kept doing this until he was starting to write about lands and worlds that were medieval but didn't really exist, had different names. He accidentally created second world fantasy on his own, I think. He was writing fantasy. They called it late prose romances, which I just don't know if that would sell these days. His last novel, which he was editing the proofs on his deathbed, is The Sundering Flood. And it had a map. And it kind of looks familiar. There's just a lot of elements. I'm like, huh. And I started looking at this, and then I did some Googling. So I'm like, why is this? Oh, he's like living, he overlaps with J.R.R. Tolkien like for 3 years. Tolkien was a baby, but I found this quote. I was brought up in the mainly Nordic tradition. I had very little acquaintance with any contemporary literature in my early days. William Morris and the Kalevala were the chief influences on me. Wow. I thought, maybe you knew this? I did not know this. And it kind of blew my mind a little bit. William Morris is the great-grandfather of the fantasy genre. I mean, I knew of his stuff before. I was looking at his designs as we were getting inspiration to do our leather-bound books. I knew of his tapestry work and things like that. I knew he was a great designer. But when I found this out, it was like discovering that my mom was like, I don't know, Vanna White or something. What? My mind was blown. And it appears that Tolkien put maps in his books because Morris had included maps in his books, which then is why Tad Williams put maps in his book, which is why I started drawing maps. So I'm like, I'm getting this, I don't know, it's like he's my grandfather great-grandfather three ways, through maps, through designing books, and through the writing that comes down to us. So I think we owe a lot to William Morris and his influence on the genre. I have a lot more things to say here, but I'm just going to sum up because we're getting close to the end. So I see a lot of what William Morris was experiencing and living in our time right now. He was dealing with the Industrial Revolution. We live in a time when there was the information revolution, basically. We're seeing an AI revolution. And my encouragement to you is to not take shortcuts. Use the tools for what they're good for, but learn to enjoy the process. That's what William Morris found as he went through all these things and he loved the process. He found joy in creating the art, not the finished product of the art. If that makes any sense. So wake up every day, enjoy your work. If you're not enjoying it, find a way to enjoy it. It really is the journey, and this is getting into Sanderson stuff here a bit, right? It's unintentionally, but it's so true. It really is the journey that we spend most of our time in. So let's enjoy it. Don't take shortcuts. Learn to love what you do. Use the tools for what it's best for. And who knows? Maybe someday you will inspire a Tolkien. We don't know. We're in a very similar time. Anyway, there you go. Thank you.